Hello. Sometimes I'm having some issues to update the data that I'm using in my test cases. For example, I have some variables, and after calling some functions or performing some steps, which is supposed to change the context of my variables, I see that the original value is still same. It has not changed or updated after calling those steps. I'm not talking about asynchronity because even if I call them within a wait, like even if I wait for all the promises to be resolved properly, still the original data is not changed, is not updated. So now we are talking about data mutation or the scope. So without further ado, let's start doing some practices. So I have a test file here. After a little bit zooming in, let me create some variables here. For example, I have an array. So this is my array, just a short one. And let's just print it out. Cool. So it should already print this to console, which is 1, 2, 3. Yes, I can see it over there. Cool. So now what I will try to do is I will call a function which is supposed to change this array. So let's create a function here. This will be my function. Or you know what? Let's start from the other way around. Like normally, I will do some operations on another value, another variable, and I have to keep the my array variable preserved. Like I don't want to update the context. But what I want to do is just use the context of this variable. Just use, but do not change. So I will copy the context to another variable, and I can do some operations on the other variable, but I want this to be reserved. So let's see what we can do. This is my function. So for example, I will create another variable, which is, let's say, this is another one. And I can just copy my array into this variable, right? I just want to use the context. And inside the function, let's do another print here. For example, let's see the first element of this array that I just copied from my array. Okay, what's happening now? I implemented the function, but I never called. So let's call it here. Cool. And what's happening now? Okay, my array 1, 2, 3, and the first element of the other list, the other array, which I copied from my array, is working as expected. Now I will change something on the other array, like let's just update the first member. Let's just set it to 4. Okay, now the first element is 4. And what happened to my original array? I don't want to change it, right? I want it to preserve. So let's print it here again. So after calling that function, I saw that my original array also changed. It is updated. Why? Because normally I don't do anything on my array, right? I have my array here. I'm just calling this function. This function just use my array, but normally I don't do anything on my array. But somehow I see that it is updated because I said I'm not doing on my array, but actually in practice I am doing something. I am changing the context of my array. Why? Because normally we know the pointer concept, right? All these variables are pointing to a memory stack. So when I equalize this another list, another array to the same pointer, so these two objects are pointing to the same context, to the same data. So when I change this data, both variables or both objects will be impacted from this because I'm changing the data that they are pointing. They are both pointing to the same context. So whenever I change this, both will be affected. So what should I do? Normally, I want my array to be kept as the original value. So what I have to do is let's deprecate this function. And let's create another one. So instead of creating another object which is pointing to the same stack, just create one and just duplicate the context of my original array. Let's just replicate. Let's do not use the pointer, but just copy, make another duplication of the context. So how can I do that? Like another one will be, maybe I can use some functions like, let's do this one. This will just get the context of my array and place into another list. I think it should be 3 dots. Yeah. Okay, now it should work without changing the original value. Let's see. Yes. Now I see initially my array was 1, 2, 3. And when I call some functions, I change the context of the other variable that I just copied from my original variable. And even if I change the context, the original array is not impacted because I'm changing the duplicated context. Now it is not the same position, which is pointed by both objects, but now both are pointing to the different context. The second one was just duplicated from the first one, but still it is another memory stack. It is not the same one anymore. So this is what I can do. For example, I can use another function here, like maybe let's use slice. By slice, I can get a frame, a part of the whole array. So let's just start from the beginning, from the first index, which is index 0, until the end. I'm not declaring any ending index. So it will take the whole context. Let's see if it is still working. This should work as the previous one. Yes, my array is still 1, 2, 3. So this is what I should do whenever I'm using the context of my variable and copying into another one. Alright, now let's talk about some functions which are supposed to directly change the context on a variable. So this time I won't have any other variable. I will not duplicate, replicate, or I will just have one and try to modify it directly. So let's create a function here. This is my function to modify my variable. So it will take in some parameters and it will change it. Like I will set to a completely new array, like 100, 200, 300. Cool. Let's print this as well, just to see what's happening now. All right. I don't need this anymore. But instead just call the new function. And I'll pass my variable, right? Because I want to change that one. So I will pass my array to this function, and this function will do a new assignment. So it will set the context as 100, 200, 300. Let's see what's happening now. My array is 1, 2, 3. All right. And then when I print in the function, I see that it is set to 100, 200, 300. And then after I exit my function, my array is still 1, 2, 3. Now it has not changed. It's not updated, right? Because what is happening here is this myArray function is just the variable which is sent to this, the parameter which is sent to this function. So whenever we do an assignment here, it is done just in the scope of this function. So whenever I print this, I can see the updated values here, but it is just in this function scope. So when we go back to the original scope where I'm calling my array, my variable, I will see again the original value. So what I have to do now in this case is, instead of using this assignment, I can just change the context of my array directly. Like, let's change the first index. And now even if I go to the original scope, I see that the value that I set inside the function is there. So assignment is just updating the function scope, but this index setting is changing the original value. So we can do some other, or we can use some other functions as well. Like there are different things we can do. Like we can use the shift operation, or we can push some new variables. Like, yeah, let's try that one. If I push a new value, I expect to see it at the end. Yeah, now it's there. So we can say that push function is again changing the original scope. So we call these kind of functions as the ones which is mutating the original variable or original value. So actually there's a good website that I'm using just as a cheat sheet. Let me show you here. For example, in this page, we can see which function or operation is mutating the original data or which is not. For example, we just did a push operation, right? So it mutates. It means it is changing the original value. Yes, or what was the other one that I was saying? Push or shift, right? Let's try to find shift. It also mutates, so let's try to do that. This time shift will remove the first element. So 100 will be gone after calling shift. Is it? Yes, it has gone. Cool. So now we know what is changing the original scope and what is not, right? And if we search for some more operations here, we can see what is mutating and what is not. Unshift also mutates. Let's do as the last example. Let's put a 5 in the beginning of the array. Did it? Yes, we can see 5 in the beginning of the array. Cool.